My name is Natasha Durovicheva, and I'm introducing today's session, ICPL session on migration and home. Then, as well you know, these papers will be not only are available not only on the seats next to you, but also will be available online. Let me say a few words to introduce our speakers. Yes, so whether voluntary or inevitable, human migration is always an index of disequilibrium of some sort, the effect of a world out of kilter, a place at a tipping point. For if a home is truly a home, no human being, I'm here making an assertion, leaves their home voluntarily. The wound of leaving remains lifelong, even when it slowly fades into just a faint scar of difference. If you're lucky enough to be a creative person, that scar, that slight welter, can be a source of some satisfaction, something to finger, to feel, to palpate, and to investigate. The mark of difference can be a lifelong impulse to work. If you're not quite so lucky, more likely than not, you will need to build yourself a shell, an armor, a carapace, even a new body of sorts. Two sets of facts. One, the UN High Commissioner of Refugees says that for the first time in the organization's history, a threshold of 60 million refugees has been crossed. Wars and persecutions have driven more people from their homes than at any time since the UNHCR records began. On an average, 24 people were forced to flee each minute in 2015, 4 times more than a decade earlier. Fact 2. Here are some novelists and poets who have had to flee their homeland for an extended period or forever. Voltaire, Nabokov, Tsvetaeva, Mann, Adorno, Arendt, Brodsky, Almadoun, Baraheni, Xinjiang, Cerise, Dorfman, Lung Ong. Our 5 panelists will speak between these 2 sets of facts. They are, from your left to your right, Kirmen URIBE, whose first book, Bilbao, New York, Bilbao, earned him Spain's 2008 National Fiction Prize and has been translated into 15 languages. His poems have appeared in The New Yorker and elsewhere. The Hour of Waking Together, with a Basque title I will not pronounce, has been published in 2017. Next to him is Yuriy SEREBRYANSKIY from Kazakhstan, who is the editor-in-chief of Esquire Kazakhstan, the editor of the Polish diaspora magazine Almatyński Kurier Polonijny, and the author of 5 volumes of prose and poetry. His novel Destination Road Pastoral won the Russkaya Premia for Best Short Prose in 2010. His novel Pražáky won the same award in 2015. His Kazakhstani fairy tales won an award at the 2017 Silk Roads Book Fair. Fatena ALGHORRA from Belgium has 4 books of poetry. 2 were translated, 1 winning a prize for the best Arabic translation into Italian. A 5th volume will appear in Arabic and in Dutch. Her work appears in the anthology 50 Years of Palestinian Poets. In 2012, she won the ALGHORRA Prize for Dutch language writers of diverse background. After a career in broadcasting in Gaza, she is now a freelance journalist for Al Jazeera, a lecturer, a performer, and the organizer of poetry events in Belgium and the Netherlands. Next to her is Esther DISCHEREIT from Germany, who has given lectures and readings around the world. Most recently, she published Blumen für Othello über die Verbrechen von Jena and edited Havel, Hunde, Katzen, Tulpen, Garz erzählt. Her work spans multiple genres and often reflects the post-Holocaust landscape in Germany. For instance, in Jüdisch Tisch and Übungen Jüdisch zu sein. In 2009, DISCHEREIT received the Erich Fried Prize, and in 2017, she was the visiting professor at the University of Virginia. She teaches at the University of Applied Arts in Vienna. And our last speaker is Anne Kennedy from New Zealand, who received the 2013 New Zealand Post Book Award for Poetry for The Darling North. In 2014, her novel, The Last Days of the National Costume, was a finalist for the New Zealand Post Book Award and was longlisted for the Impact Dublin Award. In 2016, she was in residence at the Victoria University's International Institute of Modern Letters. During her career, she has been an advocate for Maori and Pacifica voices. And before we begin, a few words about our upcoming events. The writers will be on the road this week in Seattle or in New Orleans, so we will be missing them. But but this afternoon, you can catch 3 of them at the Shambo House, 5 to 6 p.m. And that will be Audrey Chin from Singapore, Stuart Lau from Hong Kong, and Kim Do-yeon from Korea, who will be reading from their work. Saturday, September 30th at 9, the unspeakable hour of 9 in the morning, 100,000 Poets for Change event. So you think 100,000 poets and a lot of coffee for change event will be organized by Kinga Todd, if she's here somewhere, and that's going to be on the lawn in front of the Iowa House Hotel. From the Facebook event says, poets, writers, artists, and humanitarians will create, perform, educate, and demonstrate in their individual communities and decide their own specific areas of focus for change within the overall framework of peace and sustainability. So you're all welcome to join that. Then on Thursday, October 5th, at 7:30 to 8:30 p.m., we will have a reading and a kind of a joint performance. It's called Music, Memory as Creative Fuel. It's going to be in the Day House, Franklin Roy Reading Room. The explanation of the event is this season marks the 50th anniversary of the International Writing Program and also the final season of the Chiara Quartet. Join the Chiara Quartet and writers from IWP as they explore the concept of memory through musical performance and spoken word. The writers will be Vipa Sritong, Gada Alapsi, and Kim Do-yeon. And finally, next Friday at this same place and time, the ICPL panel will be Emancipating Bodies and Encountering Taboos. And this will be the taboos of the sort addressed will be sexual, cultural, religious, and political. And the question is, are there still any left? The writers investigating these will be Ramsha Ashraf, Maung Day, Santiago Giralb, Tilotama Majumder, and Subraj Singh. And now, please, let's hear from Kirmen and Forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you all for coming here. And thank you to my colleagues. And thank you, John. Where is John? For your incredible work editing my text. Thank you. So, yes. Writing from form. My daughter loves history, ancient Egypt, and she also loves Playmobil. So I gift her a Playmobil pyramid for her birthday. But then I realized that all the figures were men. The pharaoh, the soldier, the thief, even the skeleton and the mummy, all men. How was my daughter supposed to play? She needed a female figure. I searched the catalog and found a Cleopatra. I paid another 20 euros. Problem solved. One often pays more when one belongs to a minority or excluded community. This is frequently the case with blacks, gay and lesbians, and vegetarians. You have to work, wait, or pay more. I myself am from a minority, the Basque. When Dictator Franco was in power, the Basque name, Kirmen, was forbidden. But my mother registered me under this name anyway. To Franco, of course, it was the language of poor people with no culture, a useless language, and worse, the language spoken by those on the losing side in the Spanish Civil War. In these 40 years since Dictator Franco's death, however, considerable work has been invested in Basque to transform it into a language suitable for culture, science, and communication. The number of Basque language speakers is rising, and is its presence in society. Moreover, it is grown so much that a Basque writer has even been sent to Iowa. Minorities often experience tensions with majority communities, but minorities also experience their own inner conflicts. Living in a minority can also be a kind of prison. The collective good overrides the individuals. As a child in the Basque Country of the 80s, I remember communal violence everywhere. There was one word in particular that bothered me, zuek, that is Jew in plural. It was used all the time in arguments. There was so much you, no you, in through back and forth. And I wonder who you even referred to me, the V, Basques, or maybe LB, leftist Basques, or the LBWAAV, leftist Basque who are against violence, or LBWAAVWRB, leftist Basque who are against violence and who read books, or why not LBWAAVWRBLYU, leftist Basques who are against violence and who read books and like Joyce's Ulysses. Really, just me. I was shocked that they identified me in a group rather than seeing me as an individual person. How can you be loyal and critical to your community at the same time? That's the question. How can you build a society that respects an endangered culture and weaker language while also respecting the multiple identities that live there? I found my answer in Basque country, Euskal Herria, which literally means a group of people speaking in Basque. Euskal Herria is not a place, but rather a group of people linked by a language. Basque, or Euskaldun, therefore refers to anyone that can speak Basque or anyone who wants to learn it, regardless of genetic, passports, or borders that I hate. In this way, both my Japanese translator and my mother are both Basque. Currently, Basque society hosts many migrants. Nowadays, migrants and their children comprise the majority of Basque speakers. Not only its inheritors from 3 or 4 generations back. This is a big, big step forward. Languages are like living things. As such, they are equal. We should respect and preserve them. Recently, I heard a famous writer in Dublin say that Swahili is a minor language compared to English. Outrageous. Similarly, 40 years ago, the Spanish president said physics can be taught in Basque. Today, in 2017, a Basque physicist is a candidate for the Nobel Prize. If you belong to a minority, it means hard work. In the context of literature, this means fighting the cliches and prejudices others have about what you are supposed to write. The task of the writer is not to tell about exotic particularities of a place, but rather to write from an individual's distinct place in a community and the world. Joyce and Beckett were Irish, but we don't expect them to write about sheep. They wrote from the margin, which freed them to write in new forms. Free from social restraints, let's write without fears or ties, like a girl playing with a Playmobil pyramid. You know, my daughter did not like Cleopatra. She preferred the thief, who to her imaginative eyes was, of course, female. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming here. And I would like to thank the IWP program organizers for this great possibility to be here today. So, Tomasz Venclova, a well-known Lithuanian poet and Soviet dissident, said that in the modern world, nationality is not a matter of origin, but a matter of a free choice. The winter of 1991 is so memorable for me. It was my last year of high school. We were confusedly preparing for our exams. And I told my parents I wanted to apply to study journalism. My mother said the profession had no future. And then she was right, and I became a chemist. 1991 remains so vivid, not because Nelson Mandela took a step to end the violence in South Africa, or because Soviet forces stormed Vilnius to stop Lithuanian independence, or because the US started Operation Desert Storm in Iraq, but because the girl I secretly loved, my classmate Sveta Fink, received her repatriation papers and would be returning to Germany. I later learned my classmate Marisa was Jewish and would be departing for Israel after our exams. My best friend Sasha would also be leaving for Munich that year. And Denis and Pavel decided to return to two different Russian cities whose names I've forgotten because I never saw them again. It's like the feeling when scout camp comes to an end. Your friends have all gone somewhere, and you've been left behind to wander through corridors and collect their traces, towels and a pile of books, amongst which one is your birthday present. It is 1991. The USSR, the political project that defines your life, is over. The more people leave, the more difficult it becomes for those who have been left behind. You have to be German, Jewish, Polish, Kazakh, Russian, and at the same time keep all the books they left you. And so you travel. You have your nomadic mentality. You rove from one point to another, searching for a new home, and finally start writing. Tatiana Rybalchenko, a Tomsky University researcher, writes about this problem in the Russian context, but this is also true for Kazakhstan, I believe. With the collapse of the Soviet Empire, the realization of national identity becomes an existential choice, and no less a demand for mass consequences. I agree with James Baldwin, who said that authors are always trying to write the same book and find new ways to express the same things. The search of identity is a major theme of my work. I use what instruments I have at my disposal: a voice, intuition, experience, and attention to detail. But I'm no researcher. I believe that art must be controversial and should be free to assume whatever form it lacks. A good example of such art is Bulgakov's Master and Margarita. You read this book for pleasure, while also knowing that it was banned for 50 years from Soviet Union because it criticized the Soviet regime. And for example, Guernica, a piece of art and a face of war, and Delacroix paintings, and Joseph Conrad books. According to Vasily Kiselov, researcher, since Edward Said and Homi Bhabha's publications, the methodology for examining identities has been revised. Referring to their definition, the personal identity has a mechanism of referring itself to a collective whole. This is a system of interpretations, a conventional design for which the objective premises, such as commonality of language, territory, economic order, and external institutions are only grounds for a symbol production that does not require mandatory authenticity and easily replace the actual or desirable imaginary. And for me, it's a question of different optics. In Destination Road Pastoral, I focused on my protagonist's struggle to explain his identity to himself amidst Kazakhstan's new realities, post-Soviet, and his travel to compensate for his lost home. And in my novel, Prajaki, I think about the pros and cons of a new global reality. So that's the story. 6 years ago, I was in a local market in Kuala Lumpur, in Malaysia. People threw me uncomfortable stares, which one can get in any country, of course. So I ran, and I found myself in front of KFC in some huge shopping mall. The smell was so familiar. I began to wonder if we were like Colonel Sanders children in this new reality of globalization. And my protagonist found his new national cuisine. To end, I'd like to quote the Russian writer Sergei Dovlatov, who said, "I am a son of an Armenian mother and Jewish father, and have long wondered about what nationality I belong to. In the end, I concluded that I am a Russian by profession." I would like to thank Kelsey Vanada and John Water for editing of English version of this essay. Thank you for your attention.
Marhaba. Good afternoon. I say marhaba in Arabic, so because it's part of the paper. I first want to thank everybody who came here and attend this lecture or the panel. I want to thank especially Natasha and John for their help to write my paper, and also I just wanted to be simple from my heart to your heart. So, is it home, really home? A young girl opened her eyes in a beautiful city by the sea. Before stories of love were told to her, the story of homeland was the most common tale she used to hear. For as far back as I can remember, I never had a home to call my own. To explain this, I have to say that I was born in Gaza, thought it was the place of my birth. My birth certificate was marked with a special statue, refugee. I began to know what it means to be a refugee when I was a girl. When I left for school in the morning, I always wondered, where are the girls in my neighborhood going? Thank you. And why they are not going to the school with me? And why are our school uniforms different? Later, I learned that special schools were assigned to us, the refugees. Because I was treated differently, I always suspected that my real home was someplace else. I never felt entirely at home when I was in Gaza. My family, too, would remind me that my home was somewhere else, elsewhere, not in Gaza, but in Al-Kofakha, a Palestinian village located 18 kilometers to the east, which has been depopulated during the Israeli occupation 1948, and the villagers forced to flee. I pictured Al-Kofakha as a paradise. The bananas hanging on the trees were bigger and better, as was everything else. It was strange. I felt nostalgic for a place I've never seen. When half of Gaza was destroyed during the war of 2008, 2012, and 2014, however, I was unable to recognize this home in which I'd been born and raised. The circumstances of the war changed the place utterly. Then I moved to Belgium, where in the beginning I lived in a refugee camp. This was a very difficult transition. Once I'd been a TV anchor, now I stood in a line asking for food. When I finally got my legal papers and rented a flat, it was the first time I felt I had my own place. Shortly after, in 2014, when Pen Vlaanderen supported publishing my book in Dutch, I found an alternative home in literature. I invited the members to my poetry salon, a dream come true. And it was the same when the Passaporta Institute nominated me to attend IWB. Today, I miss Belgium. since it is the only home that I have. I became a Belgian citizen 1 year ago, but still I wonder, am I really Belgian? Some other Belgians look at me suspiciously. What are you doing here? Working and paying taxes, I answer. The problem is the language. I began learning Dutch from zero, but I'm denied job because I cannot speak it fluently. And without a job, how I will ever improve? At the same time, the government pushed me to find work, but when I apply for jobs, employers see that I'm overqualified. And when I tried to teach Arabic at the university, I was turned away to the advantage of locals who are able to speak Dutch. Okay. Even now, while participating in this program, my financial support was cut, so I asked, should I call Belgium my home when I'm prevented from contributing to its society to find a decent job proportional to my studies and to my work experiences like any other regular citizen? The concept of homeland goes beyond the idea of carrying nationality. It is almost genetic. And that is why the Arabic language is also a home for me. It makes me turn around when I hear it on the street of a strange country. Who am I now? And how many homes do I have? Do I have a real home? Is it Gaza, where I was born and grew up? Is it Al-Kofakha, my family village where I've never been? Or is it Antwerp, the city where I've lived for 7 years right now? Is my home in my memories or in my reality? The only thing that I'm certain of is that when your home keeps shifting, you build your own home, one that nobody can take it away or pretend it is his. This home, this is the home I found in poetry, the only home that never, ever confused me, the home that I carry it wherever I go. Thank you.
No, this shouldn't be there now, but okay, we start. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for having me here. I start with, under the title, Accept Our Existence. 1952 vintage. My room is my country. I speak German to my typewriter, wretchedly at the edge. My room is my country. These lines were published in my first volume of poetry in 1996, als mir mein Golem öffnete, when my golem opened up. Don't feel obliged to read, you can't anyway. I left the room and spent time outside, especially in the United States. I was teaching at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, the town whose citizens decided to stop worshipping Robert E. Lee. I had left the day before the Ku Klux Klan marched in. After surviving the Shoah, my grandfather emigrated to the US. The eldest daughter, my aunt, had managed to escape Hitler by first emigrating to Shanghai, and at the end of World War II, found refuge in Philadelphia. Come here, things are good here, my grandfather wrote. But we remained in Germany. Our first and only children's book, now you see it, was in English. My mother read it to us. She did not translate anything. She was showing us the language of the liberators. The sister of mine who survived the Shoah, the Holocaust, married an American football star who played, now guess what, for the Iowa Hawkeyes. And then professionally for the Cleveland Browns. He is mentioned in the Hall of Fame with his father as the NFL's first African-American father-son combination. Yes, you see it. My sister, a white Jewish woman, lived with her Afro-American non-Jewish husband in Champaign, Illinois. Together, they finally moved back to the city where their children were born, to Rome in Italy. Harold Brady still works here as an actor, singer, and painter. In this way, different linguistic passport and home country affiliations marked the family as the different kinds of religiosities. Foreign countries are a good thing, we used to say at home. Now, we could regard this as a real advantage, as a broadening of the cultural horizon and development of human adaptability. People call it integration, assimilation, or acculturation. However, at present, more people than ever before worldwide had been forced to become immigrants. The undocumented in the US, of course, wish to have legalized status. 800,000 other human beings, their children, would prefer to live in secure circumstances under DACA and to have the opportunity to lead a self-determined existence and to have the right of education. Recently, my friend Wendy told me she will be re-entering refugee camps in Vienna and Berlin to offer assistance as acupunctural and yoga teacher with her colleagues. This American group of women left a great impression on me, as well as on the young authors with whom I was working in Vienna. We were putting out a newspaper which we sell to enable refugees to obtain subway and bus tickets and arranged for German lessons at the university. Immigrants can receive free English language lessons around the area here too, thanks to the volunteers. One is among us. And we made it possible for refugees to have access to classes at the university. My sister's father reported after 45 that it took the help of 38 illegal helpers to save him from the Nazis. 38 illegal helpers to save one person. Following recent events in Charlottesville, Adele Rodriguez, illustrator of the August 28 Time magazine cover, did not avail himself of the opportunity to represent the man who gives the Hitler salute as Donald Trump. Once upon a time, a great majority of Germans liked that salute and liked demonstrating it. But a majority of Americans do not salute or ever saluted in this manner. Why shouldn't it be possible to organize the protection of the undocumented? DACA recipients and other immigrant groups are organizing resistance. In the US, there exists a long tradition, the Underground Railroad for one, a tradition of helpers of living one's life with social responsibility. One symbol of the stance is the American Memorial Library in Berlin, founded in 1954, gifted by the US, especially to a younger generation. These days, this library is the one with the friendliest disposition to the public. Day in and day out, refugees come here, as do daughters of my German Turkish neighbors, who do homework here. I too occasionally visit and do my writing there. Thank you very much.
You hear me? Kia ora tātou. Ngā mihi nui ki a koutou katoa. I'm Anne Kennedy from Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'd like to first of all say thank you for coming along today, and thank you to my wonderful colleagues, and thanks to Natasha for the introduction, and to the wonderful John for doing all he does. Thank you. My paper is called The Glass Beads of Fantasy, Writing as Trade in Settler Fiction. I was not yet civilized. I traded my safety for the glass beads of fantasy. Janet Frame, Faces in the Water. The idea of home in a post-colonial situation suggests a place of rifts, not just one rift, but many, in the way an earthquake generates aftershocks and further damage. The aftermath of colonization is damage to land, community, and, among other things, stories. My focus today is on how settler fiction can exist and assist in the repair of a post-colonial society. I'm not going to debate the problematic term post-colonial here. However, settler could equally be invader or occupier. I live in such a society as a Pākehā, non-Indigenous New Zealander, a third-generation descendant of Irish. My residence in Aotearoa is made possible by the Treaty of Waitangi, the 1840 document governance agreement between Māori and the English Crown, and importantly, by that treaty not being ratified, but rather used as a tool to peddle injustice to Māori. Like millions of white settlers around the world, in formalised and non-formalised situations alike, my identity has two sides. One slippery with the past, the other an enormously privileged present. If the treaty that constructs our tiny nation is enshrined in law, it is also possible to live without regard for it, politically, socially, and culturally, to go about pretending we Pākehā are the only ones there. We are not alone in this. In Playing in the Dark, Toni Morrison demonstrates how white American writers commonly erase people of colour from their narratives. A similar whiteout or rift occurs in much of New Zealand literature. At the same time, Pākehā have long bemoaned their lack of identity in a strange land, the phenomenon of colonial placelessness. Pat Snedden in Pākehā and the Treaty makes a case for biculturalism benefiting everybody. As Pākehā, we claim our belonging through being descended from settlers, from these settlers who agreed to the treaty. So I mention this because some settlers, the idea of sharing seems to threaten loss. If we occupiers of contested land in the relatively new place, the New World, ignore the seismic shift that was colonization, as well as the history of our freedoms, the nature of our responsibilities to our country, and our subsequent dislocations in cultural identity, then we really do belong nowhere. For settlers and Indigenous alike, the colonised past is the only show in town. The quotation I began this with by New Zealand writer Janet Frame is from the novel that fictionalises her experiences in an oppressive, abusive psychiatric hospital. In one sentence, she raises two dichotomies that often exist in settler communities. The first, I was not yet civilized, suggests that the settler is undone by the apparent wildness of the new place. This attitude predisposes the divesting of responsibility. The second, I traded my safety for the glass beads of fantasy, refers to the supposedly frightening world the settler has inhabited. Yet it is also a world of possibility. Glass beads, of course, were exchanged for land in false transactions. In a double entendre, in the way Sylvia Plath apportions her father Jewishness in the poem Daddy, Frame momentarily becomes the colonised. At least that's one reading of that line that I had a few days ago. Of course, Janet Frame is not making these statements as fact. Rather, her character expresses the problem of the real and, arguably, the internal confusion of settlerdom. Faces in the Water was published in 1961, before biculturalism was even a word. How does a working class, post-war Pākehā woman begin to question her whiteness? I suggest that she, incarcerated in a psychiatric ward, oppressed and abused, was forced to excavate the scars in her nation through the only medium left to her, the imagination. Janet Frame is one of my few Pākehā models as a novelist. Her characters are driven to interior expositions of language to explain the rift between public and personal. Other models are Jean Rhys, Marguerite Duras, J.M. Cote. All writers who engage with their post-colonial situation. It seems that Indigenous post-colonial writers cannot ignore history, while settler writers generally feel free to do so. But at what cost to their own story and to the society they live in? The common factor in the work of white post-colonial writers is that they trade their naive sense of safety for some kind of truth. Thank you.
Well, as I expected, the space in which to ask questions is wide. So, I think we probably covered that. Yeah. So, let's just take questions from the audience. We forgot the cards today. Yeah. Mary.
I enjoyed all of your presentation, and I'd like to ask the question from this so-called civilized country of the United States. Is gentrification a form of colonization? Because in gentrification, the poor, usually people of color, are driven out, while the rich, usually they're not people of color, take their place, so that the people in the original community have no home. And they have to search for a home because every place they go is so expensive. And you wonder, will they ever have a home? You understand my question?
I've just answered quickly. I mean, I think the term gentrification is a complete misnomer. It just means erasure. It means erasing everything that went before that was good and gentrified and of the people. Thank you. Thank you for the question.
Mm.
Can an English-speaking person talk about where it comes from, the word gentrification?
Yeah.
Understand that where it comes from.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's usually used to, you know, an improvement on the
On
real
a-
estate.
on a
It's a
developed
real estate,
real-
actually it's a
yeah.
real estate term, right? So actually it's not a real estate term. It's the term that real estate agents would prefer not to use because it has the full connotation of
Mm.
erasure, as Anne
Yes.
said.
Yes.
The connotation is from people who don't own, who rent,
Yeah.
turning over to people who have the money to own.
Mm.
But who want to own the pleasure, the pleasantness of the previously,
Natasha, you need to use the mic.
thank you for reminding me. Thank you. So gentrification usually involves monetizing the pleasure of the spontaneous, colorful, in all senses of the word, community that was there, that can now be monetized, yeah, as they say. Other questions? Here, please. Okay, John. Yeah.
My question is for.
No, hang on. Very good. Thank you.
Hi. I hate speaking on a mic. Anyway, my question is for Fatena, and I think some of you can answer this too. I'm from Spain, and as a Spanish speaker in a mostly English-speaking country, I feel kind of home whenever I hear someone speaking Spanish, even if they are not from Spain. You talk about home in the language, and do you agree with that statement somehow that we all find home in the language we're speaking, even if it's a minority language? You hear it somewhere and you are like automatically driven home.
Yeah, that's what I said, because of the limited space and the paper, we are a lot, and we want to just every one of us want to deliver his paper. But actually, I wanted to explain more about how language can be also an alternative home for you, because it's not only about the language, the history of the language, it's your nostalgia, your own nostalgia, because when you hear the language, you will hear a song also, and a movie, and a cliche in the street, and you will hear the whole history of your life and what you used to hear. So that's why, without even noticing, if you hear your own language in the street, you will just turn to see who's speaking that. And in some ways, I go to the people and to say, hi, where are you from? You know, I'm Arabic, where are you from? So, and we just exchange our names sometimes, or in some stories we had like friends from strange countries. So of course, it's also, for me, it's a home, and that's why even at my place in Belgium, I don't have a television, but I have like my laptop where I put all the time on YouTube. I have to hear the Arabic language all the time to feel home. So,
Others at the podium?
Yes, I may add something for this, because I have I think a different point of view. So I cannot feel myself at home in Russia, for example, because of difference of mentalities. And I think more people a lot of people from Caucasian region speaks Russian from the Soviet period cannot feel themselves at home also.
There were
No.
people in the audience, maybe we should
Yeah,
comment.
there are a lot of.
Well, if there are people.
I'd like to follow up.
Yeah, then, okay.
Like, how do you deal with translation?
Wait just 1
You
second.
know, if language is your home, how do we deal with translation? Do you feel at home when, for instance, your work is translated in another language, in Dutch, for instance?
No, it's a disaster for
So
me,
what,
especially when I hear
kind
it.
of, how do we regard that space where we can hear ourselves in a different tongue?
Well, for me, whenever I hear my translation, of course, I appreciate everybody translated my work, because I know from the beginning it's a hard work. Arabic is not an easy language, especially it's very old, and it comes with the history of the language also. So it's not an easy job for anybody to translate from Arabic to other language. And all the time when I hear my poetry in other languages, I feel like, oh, it's not what I meant exactly. This is, because there is some meanings in Arabic, it make more sense, but when I read it in other languages, it's so silly, I feel so. It's kind of betrayal, the poet or the language in a way, but actually the only way to enter the other cultures during the translation. This is our only way. Or we will ask all the people from the other countries and culture to speak Arabic or to learn Arabic, and it's impossible. So.
No, but I think I don't believe in. So I love Basque, and it's a small language. It was endangered, and it was spoken just in homes during the Franco's times, and so I love this. I love the language, and for me it was I was bilingual when I was 4 or 5, so I could write also in Spanish, but I choose the Basque because it is in a dialectical situation. It's a minority language, even in the Basque country. So I choose. I choose for the Basque for being my literature language, as you do with the Bicol, no? But I love translators, and I think we used to say that something is lost. The term "lost" in translation. No? I think something is won. Something, no, a lot of things. They are won in translations. So it's. I think the translators do an extraordinary work. They rewrite in their languages. So it's like I don't mind if if we lose the music of the Basque. It's not a sacred music. I don't know. There is another music in English. There is another music in Japanese, in Chinese, in Philippine. So wow, I'm really happy that my works are translated. My God.
Sometimes it's even a mystery that we get understood in our own language.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I would like to know about your question or statement, and then I would like to talk.
So my question is, I think, mostly for Kirmen and Yuriy, but it can go for anybody. I really liked what Anne said about the writer having to, or it is to the privileged writer's advantage to confront their privilege. And so I was wondering, how do you navigate the divide? Because you are, white men, but you are also coming from countries that are not the most privileged, or they are minority countries within larger structures. So how do you confront your privilege, but also how do you show that you are not as privileged as others, or your home countries are not?
Okay. Actually, I'm going to write an essay about this situation here that I'm facing. Like this is first time that I understand that I'm white male.
Of course.
That's true. That's very strange feeling, because in Kazakhstan we do not have this. Maybe I'm a kind of oversensitive person here, and but I'm going to write about this. It's pretty strange. We had a lot of situations here when I just realized that I'm a white male. No jokes.
I like to follow up the question before. It was said, do we all agree the language is our real home? And I don't think I could agree like this. For example, I mentioned my family, and in the letters my grandfather wrote, in the beginning they were very German. But later it was less German and less German, less German, and it ended with 1,000 kisses. So I grew up with 1,000 kisses. So it was obvious how the language entered his new home. One thing. Second, extremely under the immigrants who immigrated to the US and other states, there were a lot of people who would, for obvious reasons, even avoid to stick on German, would say, no German in my house, and they would not teach their children to learn German, would even be hurt if the children want to travel there. So there were reasons how you really would say, I get rid of everything, even the language, and there I finally found somewhere else to be. And the family I described, my sister never had a problem to speak Italian, English, and German at the same time and fluently. She didn't miss any. Her husband, you could imagine, never learned German. It's really hard for Americans. And they could get along and build another sort of home or refugee, yeah? And also, according to so-called minority languages, there is this movement to keep it going, keep it going, keep it going. And very often, one must also see this is accompanied by new raising nationalism. It's not always based on humanity thinking and global thinking. And so it's not pure. It's not always like it's wonderful that you still go on with this. And I would rather say maybe we enter now the times where it's better to have less identity. Better for all of us.
No, but I disagree. It's no. No, because no, it depends. It depends, Esther. No. It's yeah.
Just 1 second. I need to add just one. Very short. Very short. It's different from situation to another situation. I left the Arabic countries only 8 years ago, so I was built there. All my memory it was there. So that's why my relationship to the language might be different than somebody who left when he was 5 years old.
Yeah,
so
that I think is all right,
Hi.
please.
I just want to ask a question. Nations are political entities. They are not natural. They are pretty much imagined. They are violent. Behind them, I think this relates to the woman over there who spoke before, is money, big money. I mean, here we are in America. We see that every day in the New York Times now, how much. So I'm not sure I want to have an identity that's genetic, especially now I'm Jewish, and I don't feel I have a genetic identity. And I wonder, can't we be a little bit more multicultural? Do you all identify with your government? I hope not.
No.
It's race. It
My
comes to
God.
race. This is the question.
Anybody
you
wants
gonna...
to say whether they identify with their government? Anybody wants to say with their government?
No.
I just want to pick up on the word genetic, that in Aotearoa, New Zealand, if you were like a 132th Māori, you are Māori. And so it isn't, that's considered your birthright. I lived in Hawaii for 10 years, and in Hawaii they have what they call a blood quantum sort of system of saying, you're Hawaiian, you're not, because you are only a quarter, or whatever it is. And so there's people, many of whom just live and breathe their Hawaiian culture. are not legally Hawaiian. So I think there is a place for people's genetics being recognised. And in the end, I think it's down to the individual. How do you want to be recognised? And it's not up to the law or society or anybody else to say that to you. Which doesn't mean that if you don't have a genetic link, I don't think it's okay to claim it. But it's very complicated, and I think we get into very deep water trying to sort of dictate to people how they should see themselves.
Yeah, I think this is the heart of the migrancy problem. One more question, and then we'll just call it a...
Wow,
okay.
I got it. The question is for Yuriy and for Anne in particular, both of you, because Anne, you speak about that the settler in the country has to be aware that the colonization is the only history that the indigenous and the settler shares. And Yuriy, on the other hand, I think you probably came from settlers, and now the indigenous have kind of, the settlers have left, and now you're sort of in a country and you can't really identify anymore with the settlers who came before. You don't feel Russian. And so I'm wondering really if you could speak to his situation and he speaks to yours. That would be interesting.
You go first.
Thank you for your question. I have to admit that this Soviet Union period could be treated as a colonization period. Of course, some of us researchers in Kazakhstan speaking about this, but the problem is we all have their cultural code, which comes from Soviet Union, and partly Kazakh people, they are also speaks Russian now. They cannot speak Kazakh language. They don't know the Kazakh language. It's another complication, another confusion for some part of society. Yes, I come from settlers, but I'm a third generation in Kazakhstan. And my newest book, Kazakhstanian Tales, criticism calls it like an effort to create a new folklore, but not only Kazakh folklore, but Kazakhstanian folklore. So I'm trying to find my home there in Kazakhstan, and it's also a question of language, of course, a big question of language now. We look very peaceful, but inside the society there are a lot of clashes about this.
So both of you have to accept your colonial past.
Have to what?
Accept.
Can we have
Yeah.
reply?
Oh yeah, no, I totally accept my colonial past. In fact, one of the things that I'm proud of my Irish roots, and I think that sometimes there's a sort of a syndrome where white colonizers kind of the wannabe thing, they have that in America where people sort of want to be indigenous, they want to be sort of other or different, but they're just not. They're white. They have the same thing in New Zealand, and we call it Ngāti wannabe, which is tribe. Ngāti means tribe. Ngāti wannabe. And so I'm proud of my roots, and I think that actually enables me to understand how other people are proud of their roots too. So I don't subscribe to that other way of being. But I started my paper talking about the rifts that sort of go on and on like aftershocks. And one of them is that then colonizing cultures kind of shift other people in, and that's happened, all over the world. And it's happened in New Zealand as well. So there's waves of immigrant, wave upon wave. And they're all settlers. Like, we're all settlers, even if we come from Samoa, as much as I am. So I subscribe to the model where it's sort of like a car, where, I didn't make this up, that the indigenous people are driving the car, they're in the front seat, and all of the rest of us are in the back, no matter how complicated it is, no matter how much we're sort of squabbling and fumbling around and getting it up each other's nose, we're all in the back seat.
May I add a few words, please? Okay, that's important to say that a lot of nations came to Kazakhstan by decision of Stalin. As they were deported nations. Like a Polish people came from Ukraine in 1936 by train, and since those time they are living there, it cannot be treated as a colonizers. This is a problem also.
So I will say this much. It's interesting that this, what started as a question of migrancy, has turned out to be a problem of identity, which I think is a much more universal term, which in fact encompasses us all, no matter what our paperwork is. So thank you for that. A great panel as always.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.